The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Each second felt like a drop of water echoing in an empty cave. Daniel Harper sat on the couch, his elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the door. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, that kind of silence that presses against your chest until you can hear your own breathing. It was 11:42 p.m. Emily was supposed to be home by 9. She always texted if she was running late. Always. Outside, rain brushed against the windows of their townhouse in Capitol Hill, a narrow street lined with dim streetlights and cars sleeping under the drizzle. Inside, the faint glow of Daniel's laptop screen lit the coffee table, a spreadsheet still open from work. He hadn't typed a thing in over an hour. He tried calling again, straight to voicemail. Her contact photo, the one of her laughing on a beach in Oregon, hair tangled by wind, appeared and vanished. He told himself not to overthink. Maybe her meeting ran late. Maybe her phone died. But maybe was just another word for denial. Daniel stood up, pacing the living room. The framed photos on the wall seemed to watch him. Their wedding day, the road trip to Yosemite, Emily holding his hand under a sunset that now looked like it belonged to strangers. He noticed dust along the shelf edge and thought about how she used to clean every Sunday morning, humming to herself. That habit had stopped too. By midnight, worry turned into something else, an ache laced with anger. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, something he hadn't done in months, and stared at the liquid swirl in the amber light. He thought about their last conversation that morning. It wasn't even a fight, not really. She had said, "We need space, Daniel. Everything feels mechanical." He laughed it off, pretending not to hear the exhaustion in her voice. Now her absence made those words echo louder. The rain intensified, tapping against the glass like 1,000 tiny reminders. Daniel walked to the window and looked down at the empty street. No headlights, no footsteps, just wet asphalt reflecting orange light. At 1 a.m., he texted her again. "You okay? Please call me." No reply. He scrolled through her social media, something he hadn't done in months. Her last post was a week ago, a black and white photo of a coffee cup beside a book. The caption read, "Sometimes silence says more than words." He'd thought it was poetic. Now it felt like a warning. At 2:15, he tried calling her office line. No answer. By 3 a.m., the house felt colder. He sat back down, rubbing his palms together, staring at the phone screen like it might suddenly light up. The whiskey glass was half empty now. He was tired, not just from waiting, but from years of pretending everything was fine. The phone finally vibrated. A text. His pulse spiked. He grabbed it immediately. "Emily, don't wait for me. I need time to think." That was it. No greeting, no explanation, no "I love you." Daniel reread the message 3 times, each word carving deeper into him. He felt the world tilt, not violently, just enough for everything inside him to slide out of place. He typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. His fingers trembled above the keyboard before he finally set the phone face down. He walked to the kitchen, turned on the sink, splashed cold water on his face. The reflection in the dark window showed a man he didn't quite recognize. Tired eyes, unshaven face, a hint of disbelief. He wanted to scream, to drive out into the night to find her, but where would he go? Instead, he went to the bedroom. The bed was still neatly made, her side untouched. The faint scent of her perfume lingered, jasmine and something he couldn't name. It made him sit down, elbows on his knees, staring at the pillow. There had been signs. He just hadn't wanted to see them. The distant tone in her voice when she talked about work, the weekends with clients, the way she stopped reaching for his hand in public. He remembered the first time they met, a party thrown by mutual friends in Portland. Emily had been standing by the window, wearing a red dress and talking about architecture like it was poetry. She had made him feel seen, like he wasn't invisible. And now she had vanished. Daniel turned off the light and sat in the dark. Outside, the rain finally stopped. But the silence that followed was worse. It had weight, like grief. Hours later, dawn broke over Seattle, gray and reluctant. The text still sat unread on his screen, though he'd memorized every word. He whispered into the empty room, "Time to think about what, Emily?" The question hung in the air with no answer. But somewhere deep inside him, something shifted. A quiet spark, not of understanding, but of resolute. The kind that comes when pain starts to turn into purpose.
Morning came quietly, with a soft gray light that barely touched the living room. The whiskey glass still sat on the table, half full, surrounded by the remains of an untouched dinner. Daniel hadn't slept. He didn't even try. He just sat there, replaying the message in his head. "Don't wait for me. I need time to think." Every word carried a different tone, depending on how he read it. Desperate, cold, maybe even relieved. He wondered which version she meant. The city outside was waking up. Cars starting, coffee machines hissing, dogs barking. Life moved on as if his hadn't just cracked open. By 8:30, Daniel forced himself to shower, to dress, to pretend the world still required his presence. The office didn't know, of course. To them, he was still Daniel Harper, senior software engineer, the calm, logical guy who never missed a meeting. He didn't drive that morning. He walked instead, letting the rain-misted air bite at his face. He needed the cold. It was grounding. At the crosswalk, he glanced at a couple waiting beside him. A man holding an umbrella over a woman's head, her hand resting on his chest. The simplicity of it hit Daniel harder than he expected. He turned away before the light changed. When he reached the office, everything looked the same. Gray cubicles, hum of computers, the faint smell of burnt coffee. His coworker Ryan waved. "Rough night?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "Didn't sleep much." "Deadlines?" Daniel hesitated. "Something like that." He sat down at his desk, opened his laptop, and stared at code that didn't mean anything anymore. The logic that once brought him comfort now felt like noise. At 10:15 a.m., his phone buzzed again. For a split second, hope flared. Maybe she'd explain. Maybe she'd say she was sorry, that it was just confusion, that she missed him. But it wasn't her. It was a message from the bank, a notification about a charge, a boutique hotel in downtown Seattle. One night, booked under Emily Harper. Daniel froze. He clicked the details open. Check-in, yesterday evening. Check-out, today. Room for 2. His hands went cold. He leaned back in his chair, the air in his lungs suddenly heavy. A line of code blinked on his monitor, the cursor pulsing like a heartbeat. He didn't remember standing up, but the next thing he knew he was outside again, walking fast, no umbrella, no direction, just moving. The city blurred into colorless shapes. The hotel wasn't far, a boutique place with glass walls and soft jazz leaking from the lobby. He stood across the street for a while, hidden behind a coffee cart, watching guests come and go. None of them were Emily. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, fresh flowers, polite smiles. At the front desk, a young woman greeted him. "Good morning, sir. Checking in?" "No," he said, voice low. "My wife stayed here last night. Emily Harper." She typed quickly. "Yes, I see the record. Is there something I can—" "Was she alone?" Daniel interrupted. The woman hesitated, eyes flicking up from the screen. "I'm sorry, sir, I can't disclose guest details." He forced a tight smile. "Right, of course." He walked out before his voice could betray him. Outside, the rain had started again, softer this time. Daniel stopped at the corner, gripping the railing, breathing through his teeth. His mind spun through images. Emily laughing at something he said. Emily turning away. Emily with someone else's hands on her. He wanted to scream, but the city was too loud already. He found himself in a cafe across the street, staring at his reflection in the window. A man who used to trust now looked back at him, hollow-eyed, unsure. The phone buzzed again. It was her. "Emily. Please don't come looking for me. I just need to figure things out. It's not about you. It's about me. Daniel almost laughed. Not about you, the phrase everyone used before walking away. He typed fast. Where are you? No response. He tried again. Are you with someone? Still nothing. After 5 minutes, he put the phone down, then picked it up again. He zoomed into the hotel photo on their website, scanning every reflection, every detail like it might reveal something she'd hidden. That's when the anger came. Slow, controlled, like heat under glass. Not explosive. Deliberate. He didn't deserve silence. He didn't deserve half-truths. By the time he got home, the decision had already formed in his head, quiet and sharp. If she wanted space, he'd give it to her, but not without understanding what space really meant. He opened his laptop, fingers trembling, and logged into her shared iCloud account. He'd helped her set it up years ago, back when trust was easy. The password hadn't changed. Emails, calendar events, photos. He hesitated, then clicked Photos. There she was, smiling, champagne glass in hand, a man beside her, only half in frame, tall, wearing a suit, a hand resting near her back. The timestamp. Last night. He stared until the screen blurred. Then slowly, he saved the image to a separate folder. It wasn't proof he wanted. It was truth. Truth that burned, but also clarified. He leaned back, the hum of the computer filling the room. Outside, thunder rolled over the sound. The text was still open on his phone, Emily's words frozen in time. It's not about you. But for Daniel, it had become entirely about him. About what she'd taken and what he was about to take back. He closed his laptop and whispered to the empty room. Okay, Emily, you need time to think. He looked at the folder on his desktop, the one now labeled simply Plan. Then so do I.
The days that followed blurred together. Muted colors, half-eaten meals, nights without rest. Daniel moved through his apartment like a ghost in his own life. The TV stayed on just for the noise. The bed stayed cold on her side, and her toothbrush still waited untouched by the sink. At work, he functioned like a machine. His coworkers assumed he was just under pressure from a project deadline. In truth, he was living in a loop, pretending to code while his mind rewound the same memory. Her smile, that hotel receipt, the photo of her with the man whose face he couldn't fully see. He needed to know who that man was. One evening, he sat at his desk again, the glow of the computer screen lighting the room in pale blue. He opened the folder labeled Plan. Inside were screenshots, timestamps, and fragments, each one a piece of a puzzle that wasn't yet whole. Daniel wasn't a hacker, not really, but he was a programmer, and in his world, every secret lived somewhere inside a line of code. So he began tracing her digital footprints, the cloud backups, the shared data, the old linked accounts. He found the hotel reservation email again, this time reading it slower. The contact address, t.reeves@reevepartners.com. Thomas Reeves. The name was familiar. Emily had mentioned him before. A new client, a real estate developer from downtown Seattle. She'd said he was demanding but visionary. Daniel had laughed at the time, teasing her about falling for the creative type. She'd just rolled her eyes. Now the words came back with a different weight. He opened a browser, typed the name. The search results filled instantly. Thomas Reeves, CEO of Reeves Partners, one of Seattle's fastest-growing luxury property firms. Magazine features, charity galas, photos with politicians and actors. Married once, divorced, no kids. He clicked on an image. Thomas was the kind of man who looked like he belonged on the cover of Fortune. Sharp jawline, perfect hair, expensive confidence. The kind of man who made ordinary men like Daniel feel invisible. He sat back, the anger returning, quiet, heavy, rational. He didn't send messages. He didn't call Emily. He didn't confront her. Instead, he observed. He collected. He waited. On Wednesday evening, he drove past her office, a glass building overlooking Lake Union. The lights were still on inside, but her desk was empty. Her coworkers had already left. Daniel parked 2 blocks away, watching from a distance. At 8:47 p.m., she appeared. Emily, in a beige coat, hair tied back, phone in hand. She walked quickly, glancing around before stepping into a black sedan waiting at the curb. The man driving, Daniel recognized him from the photos, Thomas Reeves. The car pulled away slowly, merging into the rain-slicked street. Daniel followed. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was self-torture. Either way, he kept a few cars behind, headlights off, heart pounding against the steering wheel. They drove through downtown, past the Space Needle, then toward the waterfront, finally stopping at a restaurant with valet service and glass walls glowing gold from the inside. Daniel parked half a block away, rain dripping from his hood as he watched them step out. Thomas placed his hand on the small of Emily's back. Casual, practiced. She smiled up at him, a smile Daniel hadn't seen in months.
Something inside him cracked. He stayed there, soaked, watching them laugh over dinner through the window. He watched her touch his wrist lightly when she spoke. He watched her eyes shine in candlelight that used to be theirs. Every second burned like acid. After an hour, he left. He couldn't watch anymore. Back home, Daniel stood in the dark kitchen, gripping the counter. The city lights outside looked distant, unreal. His chest hurt, not from rage, but from the sheer weight of knowing. He wanted to hate her. He wanted to hate him. But what he felt instead was something worse, the slow death of certainty. Because beneath the anger was a whisper, a cruel, quiet voice asking, "What if it's your fault?" Maybe he had stopped listening. Maybe he had let her drift away while he drowned in work and silence. Maybe she had begged for something he didn't know how to give. He shook his head, trying to drown out the thought, but it stayed. That night, he sat down again at his desk and opened a blank document. At the top, he typed, "Questions I'll never ask." And then, line by line, he began to write. Why didn't you tell me when it started? When did I stop being enough? Did you ever plan to come home? When you said you needed time, did you mean forever? He wrote until the words blurred. Then he saved the file and stared at it. The doubt had done something strange to him. It hadn't weakened him. It had sharpened him. He realized then that he didn't just want to know the truth. He wanted them to feel it too. The way it scraped, hollowed, and humiliated. And for that, knowledge wasn't enough. He needed a way to make it visible. His eyes drifted to the folder named Plan. He opened it again, the cursor blinking beside a single line of code he had written earlier that day, a test program designed to mirror files between connected cloud accounts. It wasn't just code anymore. It was an idea, a quiet, methodical idea that could ruin them both. Daniel closed the laptop, exhaled slowly, and whispered into the still air, "This isn't about doubt anymore. It's about proof." Outside, thunder rolled again over the sound. Inside, Daniel Harper began writing the first lines of his revenge.
The next few days moved with surgical precision. Daniel didn't rush. He couldn't afford mistakes. Revenge, he realized, wasn't fire. It was ice. Slow, silent, and deliberate. He started by deepening the code he had written, an automated script that mirrored files between Emily's personal devices and a hidden server on his home computer. He told himself it was for closure, for understanding, but deep down, it had already turned into something darker: control. Each night after work, he sat at his desk while the city outside glimmered through the rain. Lines of text scrolled across his monitor, Metadata, encrypted files, fragments of messages. Most were harmless. Some were not. The first came 3 days later. A chat thread between Emily and Thomas Reeves. Thomas: "You didn't say goodbye last night." Emily: "I couldn't. It would have made it harder." Harder to leave him or harder to lie to him? Emily: "Both." Daniel sat perfectly still, reading each message as if the letters themselves carried weight. His hand trembled only once when he clicked to expand a photo attachment. Emily, in a hotel room he didn't recognize, wearing a silk robe he had never seen before. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. It wasn't the image itself. It was the ease of it, the comfort on her face. He closed the window, leaned back, and covered his eyes with his hand. He wanted to stop, but stopping meant facing the silence again, the same silence that had filled his home for weeks. So he kept going. Night after night, the script gathered more. Texts, photos, fragments of her digital life. He learned her schedule better than she probably remembered it herself. He saw every little lie: late meeting, client dinner, design review, all placeholders for something else. But then one night something changed. The program flagged a hidden folder in her email, one he hadn't seen before. It was encrypted and synced to a private drive under a different alias, EM Designs. It took him an hour to break the password. Inside were photos, not of her or Thomas, but architectural designs, sketches of modern houses and floor plans. One file stood out: Reeves Residence Project, confidential. He opened it, and his stomach turned. It wasn't just a house, it was a mansion, his mansion in a way. Every design detail, every blueprint, every furnishing decision bore Emily's mark. She was building Thomas a home, their home. And hidden in the project notes, under the comments section, was a single line that said everything. Bedroom orientation same as Lakeview Townhouse. Morning light preferred. The Lakeview Townhouse was their home. She had copied it, replicated their bedroom layout, the direction of the sunrise through the curtains, the same space where they had once whispered dreams about the future. Daniel shut the laptop, chest tight. The air in the room felt thinner. It wasn't just infidelity anymore. It was erasure. She hadn't only left him, she was rewriting their life, stone by stone, under someone else's name. He stood up and walked to the window, watching the city breathe beneath the clouds. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "So that's what you needed time to think about." He returned to his desk and opened the folder again, this time not as a husband, but as something else entirely. A quiet observer preparing to turn truth into weaponry. He copied the files, every message, every photo, every project document with her signature. Then he opened a new window, searching for Thomas Reeves' business email, the one attached to several press releases and interviews. He hovered over the compose button. He could expose them now, end it all, destroy her career, ruin his reputation. But something inside him whispered, no, not yet. That would be too easy, too clean. He wanted them to feel it, the waiting, the fear, the slow unraveling of certainty. So he saved the message as a draft instead, unsent but ready. Just knowing it existed was enough. Later that night, as he scrolled through one of her message threads, something unexpected appeared. A message from Emily to her friend Claire. Emily to Claire, "Sometimes I think I broke something that can't be fixed. He's a good man, I just don't know who I am anymore when I'm with him." Daniel froze. For the first time since this began, he saw her not as the betrayer, but as someone lost, as broken as he was. He closed his eyes. For a fleeting second, pity brushed against his anger. Then he forced it away. She had made her choice. At 2:17 a.m., he wrote a single note in his journal, a new entry under a heading that now read, Phase 2. Exposure doesn't heal, awareness does. Make them aware. He leaned back, exhaling slowly.
The man who had once built software for efficiency now designed something for consequence. The next morning, Daniel called in sick to work. He spent the day scripting automated backups, creating hidden folders, setting timers. It wasn't about hacking anymore. It was architecture. He was building a system of accountability. By the time the sun set, the foundation of his revenge was complete. All it needed now was timing. As he shut down his computer, a quiet thought flickered in his mind. Not satisfaction, but a strange calm. He realized that the line between justice and cruelty had already started to blur. And yet, for the first time in weeks, Daniel Harper finally slept.
Daniel approached revenge like he had every complicated problem in his career. Break it down, map the dependencies, design for failure, and automate wherever possible. The house hummed around him with ordinary noises. The kettle in the kitchen clicking off, the neighbor's lawnmower somewhere down the block, a garbage truck idling at the corner. Those sounds were the background track to the quiet construction beneath his hands. A plan that was technical, surgical, and above all, irreversible. He spread everything out on the dining table like a detective laying evidence. Printed emails, screenshots, a small stack of hotel receipts, and a spreadsheet he had written to cross-reference dates with messages. Between each stack, he placed a post-it with a single word: timing, audience, collateral, denial. His laptop became the command center. Lines of code scrolled in tandem with his breathing as he refined the script that had been gathering data for weeks. It mirrored files, captured drafts, and backed up artifacts to an off-site server he'd spun up under an alias. He had set up disposable email accounts tied to a burn phone number. He had created a secondary social profile designed to look like a concerned colleague from a community group, a believable conduit for information. He wasn't interested in anonymous blackmail. He wanted exposure that looked like accident, the kind that left no single point of blame, and therefore felt like truth. If people discovered the affair because a private message thread leaked, they would think it was a breach. If Emily's clients found out through a misdirected design file, it would feel like administrative carelessness. Subtlety was cruelty's most effective form. There were moral calculations to be made, and Daniel ran them like unit tests. Would this ruin careers? Possibly. Would it harm innocence? Maybe. He sat for a long time with that thought, watching the city through the kitchen window as dusk softened the skyline. He thought of his mother, the way she'd advised him never to let anger make his decisions, to instead let clarity roll. He had, he told himself, not anger, but clarity. The distinction felt flimsy when he read Emily's messages and watched photos of her drifting into another life. Phase 1 was containment. Isolate the evidence and prevent it from being wiped. He programmed the script to pull new files into immutable folders on the hidden server every night at 2 a.m., during the window when backups usually ran. He tested it a dozen times, watching his emails, photos, and calendar invites replicated into his vault. The folder structure mirrored Emily's own labels: clients, personal, drafts, but inside, a new label appeared: expose. Phase 2 was amplification. He drafted 3 different narratives and mocked them up as real-world leaks: an anonymous tip to a local real estate blog, a forwarded internal email to a distribution list that included a handful of Emily's clients, and a fabricated LinkedIn message thread between Thomas and a contracting partner hinting at impropriety in tendering. He rehearsed the wording until each line felt plausible, the kind of phrasing that would make readers nod and forward without thinking twice. Phase 3 was emotional architecture. Daniel wanted the revelation to hurt not just Emily and Thomas, but to ripple through the communities that had validated them. The charity boards, the neighborhood associations, the glossy weekend features. He created a schedule for dissemination. Start small and local, let gossip fester, and then once the narrative took hold, drop the more damning material in waves timed with predictable human behaviors. A Monday morning email blast when inboxes were full, an Instagram story on a weekend when comment threads swelled, a PDF sent to a property investor when markets were paying attention. Yet even as he crafted the broadcast, there were softer modules in the plan. Perhaps proof that old Daniel still existed. He wrote a private document labeled Boundaries, listing the things he would not do. No forged payments, no direct threats, no involving minors, no violence. He felt the need to preserve some line, some ethics lint that prevented total collapse. The list steadied him, like a ring around a spinning top. He rehearsed scenarios with clinical precision. If Emily confronted him, he would say nothing. If she deleted accounts, his backups would have redundancy. If Thomas retaliated, the legal trail of his firm's own public statements would help validate the claims. He prepared contingency emails that looked like they came from an internal staffer at Reeves Partners, awkwardly worded but legitimate enough to seed doubt. At 2 in the morning on a Thursday, when the city dipped into that deep, quiet blue between midnight and dawn, Daniel sat back and watched the automated tasks run. Files duplicated, logs recorded. The machine he had built hummed like a sleeping animal. He felt the oddest thing, a sense of craftsmanship. There was art in the architecture of exposure. He felt, briefly and unpleasantly, proud. And yet the plan required patience, not Daniel's strongest virtue. He had always preferred measurable outcomes, sprints with clear deliverables. This was a marathon of social attention and human error. He would have to trust other people's small cruelties, gossiping neighbors, a careless assistant, a journalist's curiosity. He would have to let the world do what it did best, judge and consume. There was another element he added last, almost as an afterthought. He scripted a message to himself, to be sent to his own account after the first public stirrings. It was simply a text file titled, "For Later." Inside, one sentence: remember who you wanted to be before this started. He saved it, encrypted it, and scheduled it to appear 3 days after the first public stirrings. The irony of that small self-check felt like a confession. When the plan felt whole, Daniel closed his laptop and stood up. The house was still. His footprints on the hardwood were the only sign he had moved. He walked from room to room, touching the objects that had once been mundane: the lamp by Emily's reading chair, the mug she always used, the stack of architectural magazines she kept dog-eared. Each one felt like a relic now, relics of familiarity that he was about to weaponize. He had designed the plan to be neat, accountable, and in its own way, fair. That thought brought no comfort. There was a hollow consonance in the idea of fairness when measured against love's dissolution. Outside, a neighbor turned on their porch light, and for a moment the house across the street looked ordinary again. He watched that soft glow and wondered who would get to tell the story once the world had learned what he knew. He had arranged the architecture. The story would write itself. He went to bed at dawn with the city still breathing and the machine silently cataloging Emily's life. His phone buzzed twice in the night, once with an email preview, once with a calendar alert for a design review Emily was scheduled to lead. He didn't open either. In the faint light of early morning, he slept. Not easily, but finally, suspended between intention and consequence.
The first strike wasn't immediate. Daniel knew the art of revenge was patience. Like chess, it required watching the opponent make the first few moves, allowing small mistakes to appear before delivering the checkmate. He spent the day as usual: office hours, polite smiles, meaningless code on the screen, all the while monitoring his hidden server. Every new email Emily sent, every message she typed, was mirrored silently into his private archive. Each update whispered secrets he had yet to confront, secrets that would serve as ammunition in the days to come. By Wednesday evening, the first opportunity arrived. Emily, in her carefully curated social media, posted a photo celebrating a small professional achievement: the unveiling of the luxury home model she and Thomas had co-designed. A caption full of charm and pride. Daniel smiled coldly. Perfect. He opened a new tab and drafted a helpful email to a local architecture magazine. He framed it as a casual tip from a concerned professional acquaintance. Hi there. I noticed some inconsistencies in the recent Reeves Partners project files. Seems like a former employee's personal data may have been included in the plans. Not sure if it's intentional, but worth a look. The words were mild, almost neutral, but loaded with potential. He didn't send it yet.
The game required timing. He scheduled it to arrive the next morning at 10:07 a.m., when editors were settling into their inboxes and more likely to forward the email internally. Next, he focused on Thomas. Daniel's research had revealed subtle vulnerabilities, a minor licensing issue that could cause a professional hiccup if publicly noticed, and a pattern of overconfidence that made him blind to small anomalies. He began feeding small, coincidental signals. A draft message from Thomas's assistant accidentally forwarded to Daniel's dummy email, a calendar invite appearing in multiple time zones, minor inconsistencies in public files that Daniel had manipulated. Everything was calculated. Nothing was impulsive. At 10:07 the next morning, Daniel checked his email. The Architecture magazine responded instantly, requesting a meeting to discuss the files. The chain was rolling. Small ripples that could become tidal waves. He didn't celebrate. Not yet. By lunchtime, Emily called. "Daniel, are you okay?" Her voice, tentative. He paused before answering, letting her worry settle. "I'm fine," he said finally, neutral, calm. She hesitated. The pause on the other end was audible, almost painful. He hung up and returned to monitoring his system. By afternoon, the subtle dominoes had begun to fall. The magazine editor forwarded the concerned tip to the senior writer, who noticed the unusual file patterns. The story was gaining interest internally. Daniel could see the curiosity in the headers of forwarded emails, the tiny sparks of doubt forming in professional inboxes. He also tracked Emily's response, a flurry of frantic messages between her and Thomas. She hadn't realized the data duplication yet. That would come. And when it did, the panic would be measured and precise. Later that evening, Daniel watched from his apartment as Emily walked past his building with Thomas. Their casual laughter, the easy touch of hands, struck him with a bitter pang. He reminded himself, this was not about hatred anymore. Not exactly. It was about clarity, about showing them what happens when secrecy meets truth. He sat down again and drafted the next phase, a controlled release of their private conversations. Nothing obscene, nothing libelous, simply evidence of deliberate avoidance, private admissions, moments of betrayal. It wasn't humiliation for the sake of humiliation. It was exposure to let consequences exist naturally. He smiled quietly at the irony. In a few days, the truth would be public, but they would never know it was him. That was the elegance of the plan. Daniel had built a system where the outcome depended on them, not on force. Every misstep they made would fall perfectly into place. At 11:45 p.m., he received a new message from Emily, a short text. "Daniel, I feel like something's wrong. I can't explain why, but..." He didn't respond. Instead, he opened a live view of the mirrored folders. Every photo, every email, every fragment of conversation moved through the system silently, archived, time-stamped, and waiting for the right moment. Daniel leaned back in his chair, hands clasped. The city outside was quiet now, the occasional car passing below. Rain had begun to fall again, tiny droplets pattering against the window. The rhythm was hypnotic, like a metronome counting the seconds until justice unfolded. For the first time in weeks, he felt a faint pulse of satisfaction. Not triumph, not glee, satisfaction. The game was in motion. The pieces were moving exactly as he intended. And in the darkness of his apartment, Daniel Harper allowed himself a single thought. Soon, they will understand. Soon, they will know what it feels like to be exposed, vulnerable, and uncertain. And when that day comes, I will not be the same man I was before. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city in silver light. Inside, Daniel watched, waited, and played. The morning broke gray and heavy, the kind of Seattle dawn that made every street look wet even before the first rain hit. Daniel's apartment was silent, except for the soft hum of his computer. Overnight, the automated systems had done their work. Files mirrored, emails queued, drafts scheduled, every detail meticulously arranged. At precisely 9:03 a.m., the first ripple appeared. A junior editor at the architecture magazine opened the forwarded email Daniel had sent as a concerned tip. The message was innocuous on the surface, but its attachments revealed discrepancies, private project files belonging to Emily and Thomas. She forwarded it to the senior editor. Within an hour, curiosity bloomed into interest, and a casual internal discussion turned into a formal inquiry. Daniel observed it all quietly. He didn't gloat. He studied. Every click, every forward, every reply all note confirmed the plan was unfolding as he had designed. By late morning, Emily had noticed something was off. She called Daniel, panic softening her voice into something almost childlike. "Daniel, the magazine. They have the files. I don't know how." He listened, silent. Not a single word of reassurance, not a single apology. Silence was more powerful than any argument he could have offered. "They're saying the designs have inconsistencies. They want a public statement, Daniel. Thomas wants me to. I don't know what to do." He leaned back in his chair, allowing the words to sink in. Exposure was never meant to humiliate. It was meant to illuminate. And now she was illuminated. On the other side of town, Thomas sat at his glass desk reading an email thread that had arrived hours earlier. His professional demeanor faltered, and the calm confidence he usually exuded wavered. Questions mounted. Small inconsistencies in project files he hadn't noticed before now seemed glaring. He sent frantic messages to Emily demanding explanations, and Emily, cornered and scrambling, realized the truth of the situation. She had no control. By midday, Daniel had taken the next step. He scheduled another batch of files to accidentally appear on a public architectural forum, a place where industry professionals routinely shared their work. Each file contained careful documentation, timestamps of her messages to Thomas, hotel reservations, and private discussions about strategy and decision-making. Nothing illegal, nothing overtly defamatory, but enough to form a clear pattern of deception. He watched as the forum moderators received the uploads, checked the metadata, and then allowed the posts to go live. After all, everything seemed legitimate. Within an hour, threads began to sprout. Discussions among peers, speculations, hints of disapproval. The pattern was forming, subtle but undeniable. Emily's reputation in the industry began to wobble. Thomas's credibility followed. In the privacy of his apartment, Daniel felt the strange duality of power. The satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly and the creeping emptiness of orchestrated pain. He had never imagined revenge could feel so meticulous, yet so cold. At 3:15 p.m., Emily texted him again. "Daniel, I think they know everything. I'm scared. Please, I don't understand what's happening." He stared at the screen, feeling nothing and everything at once. Then, carefully, he replied with a single line. "The truth always finds its way. I only open the door."
The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Daniel monitored media mentions, email forwards, social media chatter, and forum posts. Each interaction reinforced the chain reaction he had set in motion. Emily and Thomas were trapped in a network of exposure, their carefully constructed world unraveling pixel by pixel. By evening, local blogs had picked up the story, framing it as a mysterious data leak impacting high-profile architecture projects. Their peers whispered about ethical lapses and blurred boundaries between personal and professional conduct. Daniel sat back, sipping cold coffee, noting the symmetry, every reaction, every escalation, perfectly aligned with the schedule he had mapped. At 8:30 p.m., Daniel watched as Emily, desperate, finally confronted Thomas. He couldn't hear their words, but the tension radiated across the glass walls of the building from his distant vantage point. Thomas's jaw tightened, Emily's hands trembled. They were facing the consequences together, but in their panic, they were isolated, unable to see who orchestrated it. Daniel's phone buzzed. A notification from his dummy account showed that a senior architectural consultant had forwarded the mirrored files to a local investigative journalist. The story was about to go public on a larger scale. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. The exposure was complete, yet subtle enough that no one could trace it back to him. His revenge was a quiet machine, precise and anonymous. The lesson, he thought, was clear. Deception always leaves trails, no matter how carefully buried. That night, Emily called again. Her voice cracked. "I don't know what to do, Daniel. Everything's collapsing. I interrupted gently, but firmly. Face it. Accept it. Understand the consequences of your choices. That's all anyone can ask." She fell silent. I let her linger in that silence, letting the weight of realization settle. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He had orchestrated exposure not for spite alone, but to hold them accountable for the betrayal, for the lies, for the erasure of their shared life. Yet even in victory, a hollow echo remained. He had forced clarity on them, but at the cost of something inside himself, the innocence of belief, the naivete of trust. As midnight approached, the city outside was quiet, the rain tapering to a gentle drizzle. Daniel sat back, surveying the remnants of the day. The files had moved, the emails had sent, the whispers had begun. Emily and Thomas were now navigating a reality he had designed, a reality in which every choice, every slip, every hidden action had consequences. For Daniel Harper, the game had reached its apex. And yet, deep inside, he knew the aftermath would not be simple. Revenge had a way of shifting, evolving, sometimes turning back on the one who wields it. He didn't care. Not yet. The exposure was executed. The lesson was delivered. And for the first time in weeks, Daniel felt a strange calm. The storm was no longer coming. It had arrived.
He realized in that moment that revenge was not the same as relief. The act of exposing truth had delivered justice in a mechanical sense, but it did not erase the hollow ache that lingered in his chest. It did not restore the years they had shared, the dreams they had whispered together, the intimacy he had once taken for granted. That night, Daniel walked through the quiet streets near his apartment. The rain had polished the sidewalks to a mirror sheen. He watched reflections ripple in puddles, the distorted images of streetlights and passing cars forming fractured versions of reality. In the fractured reflections, he saw his own face, weary, tense, and yet somehow relieved. He thought about Emily, alone in the apartment she had shared with him, grappling with the consequences of her choices. He thought about Thomas, who had built his life in parallel to hers, now forced to confront the fragility of trust. And he thought about himself, a man who had once been betrayed, who had allowed hurt to ferment into careful, deliberate action. In the quiet, he acknowledged something he hadn't dared to admit before. The plan had worked, but the cost was deeper than victory. Revenge had not healed him. It had clarified, illuminated, and delivered justice, yes, but it had also confirmed the inescapable truth. Love, once broken, leaves a scar that no meticulous scheme can erase. He returned to his apartment, sat at the desk, and opened his journal. He wrote a single entry.
The game is complete, exposure delivered, accountability observed. And yet, the hollow in my chest remains. Time may heal, or it may simply teach me to live with the echoes. I am no longer the man who trusted blindly. I am no longer the man who waited silently. I am Daniel Harper, and I have seen the consequences of betrayal, in truth and in silence. He closed the journal and stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker on as night fell. Somewhere, Emily and Thomas navigated their new reality. Somewhere, life continued for everyone who had been caught in the web of secrets and choices. Daniel allowed himself to exhale. The storm had passed, the exposure complete, and the consequences laid bare. There was no celebration, no triumph, only quiet observation. Life, he realized, would continue, messy, unpredictable, and real. And so would he. For the first time in months, Daniel felt the possibility of peace. Not the peace of reconciliation, not the peace of returned love, but the peace of clarity. He had done what he could. The rest, he decided, was no longer his responsibility. And somewhere in the city, rain falling lightly on glass and concrete, he allowed himself a single thought to surface, soft but certain. The truth always finds its way. Sometimes all we can do is let it. The apartment was quiet. The city breathed. And Daniel Harper, finally, could sleep.